Welcome to our next presentation, Black Cat Syndicate. Look at that first opening slide. Isn't that awesome? The ASX code, write it down, is BC8, and here to tell the story is Gareth Solly. He's the managing director. These guys are on fire. They listed end of January 2018, and they have been doing a lot of work. Over to you, Gareth.
Thank you very much, Kerry. It's a pleasure to be here at the virtual gold conference and happy to share our story. So, normal disclaimers and CP statements at the start. Here's the summary. So Black Cat, we are a junior gold explorer. We have been listed now for just under 3 years. One thing we have been is very active. We try and put a lot of meters into the ground. We try and do a lot of geology, and we have been rewarded with that so far. So we're very happy with our position. We are now embarking on the road to development. And I'll go through some of the steps we'll be undertaking in the next 12 months to get to that point. But we are one of the largest landholders within the area of Kalgoorlie. So most of our ground sits within 50 kilometres of Kalgoorlie. We've got 756 square kilometres, and there's stacks of potential on this ground. We are targeting 1 million ounces in the short term. So we're sitting on about 884,000 ounces right now, and we've got a 1 million ounce target. We want to define 3 years ore reserves. So that's important. We want to be in development. We need about 3 years, we think, to justify building our own mill. So of course, the fourth point on here is we need a milling solution. So with that in mind, we've got Como engineers doing detailed designs for us. That will be coming out in the next couple of months. But we want our own mill. We want to have a sustainable mining business. And as I said in the first point, we have a load of potential. This year we're drilling about 60,000 metres, and that 60,000 metres will go into extension of resources, discovery of new resources, and of course, definition of reserves. Here's the company structure, the corporate structure. It's quite simple. We have 110 million shares on market, well supported, and we have a very experienced board. Market cap, depending on the share price, around $80 million. Top 20 hold about 45% of the company. Silver Lake is the biggest individual holder with 9%. They came in with an acquisition we made from them earlier this year, and they maintained their position in the last raise we did in July. About 10 million in the bank. And the directors have put in quite a bit over the last couple of years that we've been in existence. So those directors, in particular, are Paul Chapman, who's our chairman, and Les Davis. Those guys are the founding directors of Silver Lake Resources. Certainly, they've been around a long time and they know how to work these businesses. Myself, I met Les and Paul at Silver Lake. I was the registered manager at Daisy Milano in the early days of Silver Lake. We've got Alex Hewlett, famous more recently for Spectrum Metals and the good M&A they did with Ramelius in the last 12 months. And then Tony Polglaze joins us. He took Avanco from exploration through to development, building their own mill, and through to M&A as well. So Tony's with us. He's the millman, and he's assisting us in that department. Here's the location slide. It's the Cal East Gold Project. All our ground sits to the east of Kalgoorlie and very close to Kalgoorlie. There's about 600,000 ounces being mined from this parcel of ground that we own historically, all the way from pre-World War I activity through to the last couple of years. Silver Lake have taken some ounces out of the ground. Being so close to Kalgoorlie, we've got really good access to local service providers. We've got local workforces, and we've got all-weather roads. There's not a lot of mills out the eastern side of Kalgoorlie. Most are sort of centred to the west of Kalgoorlie. So there's a real opportunity for us to build our own mill and a sustainable business on the eastern side of Kalgoorlie. Here's another image of the ground position with a 50k radius around Kalgoorlie. Where we initiated our lease holding was at Bulong. Sits just 25 kilometres due east of Kalgoorlie itself, the old Queen Margaret mine. We started with zero resources and we've built that up from there. More recently, this year we've made quite a few acquisitions. We've acquired ground from Silver Lake Resources, we've acquired from Newmont, and we've acquired from Aruma, and now we have about 756 square kilometres of really prospective holdings. So we're stoked with this ground holding. You certainly struggle to find vacant ground around Kalgoorlie, and we really think there's good opportunities on this lease. This is the resource table. So one way to measure a company is how many resource ounces they have. Currently, we have 884,000 ounces. We do have a near-term target of the 1 million ounce mark, so it's not too far to go for us to get to that point. We have a reasonably low discovery cost. It averages out $23 an ounce. That includes all the early work we had to do at Bulong, where we started with 0 resources. Acquisition cost works out around $6.50 per ounce. We have acquired a few ounces this year, and we are now growing those ounces with our drilling program. So as I said, we've got about 60,000 metre program underway at the moment. And right now we actually have 3 rigs on site, 2 RC and 1 diamond. And they are targeting that resource growth. They're targeting conversion of reserves. And we will be releasing studies, mining studies in the near term, and that work will continue over the next 12 months as well. Some of the areas that we'll target include, I'll go through some of those areas now, so including Imperial and Majestic. So we've got a diamond rig positioned to the west of the pit here, drilling underneath these resources. So the holes you see here, this is a long section, so north to south, and we'll be drilling these purple dots at the moment with our rig. We've recently had some success, some quite good intercepts, 6 at 7, 4 at 9, and some of the deepest results into this particular deposit, 2 at 24, 1 at 30. So there is high grade, narrow vein potential here. The pits were mined as broad zones of mineralisation, and they were modelled as broad zones of mineralisation. And certainly we believe it needs an underground focus to really investigate the underground potential. So that's what we're drilling for, and that's what we'll be doing in the near term. If we zoom out a little bit and look down now on the same area, so we were just looking at a cross section, a line through here, a long section between Imperial and Majestic. That's where they sit. We believe there's strong potential to the north, where there's very little drilling that goes through the stripped profile to the north of Imperial. There's also still potential to the south of Majestic, as well as, of course, at depth where we're drilling now. We've recently drilled the Jones Find prospect, which is just a kilometre to the east of Imperial and Majestic, and there we had some good success, 13 at 5, 13 at 2, so some broad zones, good mineralisation, and it needs following up in the near term. Other areas that haven't been drilled for a while, Crown sits to the south of Imperial and Majestic. Again, it hasn't really been drilled since the 90s, and some broad, high-grade zones and not a lot of deep drilling. And then Treasure Chest is another target that we have. Again, 14 metres at 5.7, some nice, thick, high-grade intersections, and more follow-up to be done. So there's a lot of targets in and around the immediate mining opportunity at Imperial and Majestic. So this is Fingals Fortune. Now this sits about 8 kilometres south of what we just looked at Imperial and Majestic. Again, we acquired this lease from Silver Lake in July this year. We acquired 88,000 ounces of resource. We've now defined an additional sort of 50,000 ounces. We've got 135,000 ounces of resource here now, and we are currently drilling these red holes, targeting further growth. We've drilled in this area here. We've got some good results, and we do believe that there's potential for a much larger open pit mine to be developed here. This is the existing pit that was mined in the early 1990s. There was a mill positioned on site here, and they processed this as one of the main feeds to that mill. It was 36,000 ounces taken out of that particular pit. So now if we, again, step back and zoom out, we were just looking at this area. This is where the mill was positioned back in 91, 92, and there's the tails facility for that. At that point, they mined 3 small pits to supplement the feed to this mill. These have some drilling intercepts below the historic pits, and really no one's looked at this since those pits were initially mined. So we really like this other area. You know, it's a lookalike really of what Fingals is. So 6 at 3, 3 at 6, you name it. There's some good hits there, and there's some other areas that weren't mined, and again, they look encouraging. So we've got near-term objectives to, you know, once we've finished extending resources and proving up open pits here, we'll be moving over to the east and following up on these other areas. This is one of the acquisitions we've made more recently. Trojan sits 10 kilometres to the west of Imperial and Majestic, where we looked initially. Similar in a lot of ways, large sort of granitic system, big shear zones that run through that. Back between 2001 and 2004, produced 125,000 ounces. There's still 115,000 ounces in resource below and along strike of that pit. So we think there's a lot of potential. Certainly no one's done a lot of work in this area to follow up on this historic system. So there's other shears that run through the area you can see on the mag that we'll be following up on in the near term as well. And here's a little cherry that we have sitting a little bit further out. This one is called Rose Find. It's about 100 kilometres from Majestic to the east. Really, it's a fairly underexplored greenstone belt. Integra did some drilling here in the mid 2000s, and they defined a resource of about 17,000 ounces at that point. So 3.5 grams per tonne, shallow resource. That resource is in the dotted line here. So again, this is a long section. In 2012, there was some additional drilling put in that has not been added to this resource yet. So 6 at 45, quite shallow, 15 at 7.4, extension to that resource, and 4 at 6 at depth. So we see this as being open. We plan to come in here and extend and drill for resource growth on this project. But there's some great grades, and this could be anything. So we're pretty excited. We do hope to be out here drilling in December this year. And if we step back and take a more holistic view of where the leases sit, so where we have been looking has been Imperial Majestic. We looked at Jones Find in and around that area. We looked at Fingals Fortune, which sits down here, Trojan, and Rose Find. The old Bulong leases, which has about 300,000 ounces, sit here. This is where we started our exploration 2 years ago. And Slate Dam sits part of the Aruma acquisition. So there's a lot of potential. There's really good drilling hits throughout the lease package, and there's a lot of work that needs to be completed to follow up on that exploration, that early success that has been had in the past, and we're having as well. Some of the areas that we're yet to do the work on, Hammer and Tap on Bowler, they were acquired from Silver Lake. We've got the Black Hills acquisition, which tacks on nicely to Fingals Fortune and is the along strike trend of where that mineralisation goes. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done around Imperial Majestic, as we mentioned, and that's where Rose Find sits further out to the east. Myhree is a discovery we made in 2018. So we started drilling in March after we listed in January, and by June, July, we'd made a discovery here at Myhree. We've since been continuing to drill this and increase the drill spacing, or decrease the drill spacing as it may be, to get this to an indicated status. So we've been working to initiate mining here at Myhree, and we will be getting information on our mining studies out in the short term. But this will probably be where we start the production. Myhree we see as a two-stage pit, and it would be a base load for any other pits that would be mined in that Bulong area. We have approvals in place already. So the ore comes to surface. We've got approvals for clearing and commencement of mining on stage 1. We've submitted the documents for stage 2. We expect to get approval for that in the coming months. It's certainly a low-cost startup exercise here. As I say, there's no big strip or anything. We have to build an office, put the road in, and we're away. So expect us to start mining around Myhree sometime next year. So of course we've got lots of growth targets. We've got lots of mining potential. We need a milling strategy. So what we're looking at the moment is to have a centralised mill in the middle of our lease package that we could haul the respective resources into. And just so happens that that first area we looked at, Imperial and Majestic, makes an ideal place for that. It's got a ready supply of water. It's a granted mining lease, nice and flat, and it's central to the bulk of the resource. So that's what we're assessing at the moment. Como are doing a detailed design for us, and we expect that to be back in around January next year, so a couple of months' time. We are targeting a very low startup mill. We have, plenty of service providers in the town of Kalgoorlie. We're only talking about 50 k's out the road, so we'll utilise those service providers to make sure that we can keep the capital low to start. And we're also going to design it for expansion. So it'll start with the size that's commensurate with our package of resource that we have at the moment, and that'll be disclosed in mining studies, and then we'll make sure it's expandable later on. So that's all being built into the design. We've already identified long lead time items. We've put an option on some tanks. We've got ball mills identified. So we're doing all the background work to make sure we can get this up to mining next year. In terms of the timeline for that, where we are now, we're drilling, obviously drilling to grow the resources and to define those initial reserves. We're completing the design for the mill. We're putting our foot on those long lead time items that may delay anything. And next year will be about construction of the mill after a tender process, commencement of mining, and of course, then initiating, commissioning the mill, and while we continue to grow the resources and reserves. The year after that, we'd expect to be commercial production, full production in early 22, and then growing resources again to facilitate, a long-term mining proposition on the eastern side of Kalgoorlie. So there's the summary slide again. We have a big package that's got a lot of potential, very close to Kalgoorlie. We have a 1 million ounce target for our resources. We've got targeting 3 years of reserve, and we expect to release studies in the next couple of months. We are working on a milling solution. Certainly there's a lack of milling to the east of Kalgoorlie, and we hope to have a solution in place early next year and built by the end of next year. And certainly there's going to be good news flow. We've got 3 rigs on site. We're continuing to drill for expanding our resources as well as for that reserve conversion. So watch this space. Black Cat's got plenty of news to come.
And an excellent presentation, Gareth. My goodness me, you have put your pedal to your foot to the ground there, because you've only just really, for a lot of companies, they're still just exploring, but you're talking about going into production next year with Myhree. It's interesting, you talked about a mill. Do you think that other companies may utilize that centralized milling solution as well? Will that give you a little bit of an option there as well? Or are you looking to use that and utilize that purely for Black Cat?
Well, we believe that we will be able to utilise that ourselves 100%. But longer term, you could argue that there's a lack of milling out that side, and there is an opportunity potentially for other ways for business to be developed later on. But we certainly intend to be able to completely fill out our own mill.
Okay, we're running short on time. Why should investors look at Black Cat at this point in time? I think it's a great story. Drilling is, to me, a great opportunity to get involved when all the drilling's going. 75% of your expenditure is going into the ground, which is really good news for shareholders. What would you say, just to finish off, to the investors listening today?
Well, I think, we are very active. That is one thing. If you're looking for news flow, you can look at our website. We release very regular updates, and that's because we are so active. We're active on both the acquisition as well as the exploration front and the drilling front. We're in that position now where we're moving towards that development. So if you want to get in before we get to that point, then now is a good time. We do have a very strong board, Kerry. The guys have done this before. They've built mills. They've certainly built up companies from junior explorers through to larger miners. So, the guys have done it before, and we're very keen to do it again.
Well, as I always say to the investors out there, do your own research. But guys, very strong board is so important. They've done it before. They know how to do it. They're building a mine. I guess Myhree is going to give you some cash flow as well in the short term.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today on the Virtual Gold Conference, Gareth.
Thank you, Kerry.